The knock came just after noon when the lake lay still under the pale winter sky, and the bare maples stood like sentinels at the edge of the yard. I opened the door to find my father William on the porch, shoulders squared as if he were bringing good news. His hands, once roughened by years hauling nets out of Chesapeake Bay, now trembled faintly as he reached into his coat pocket. He laid the envelope on my kitchen table with a flourish as though presenting a gift. A cashier's check slid out its neat type announcing $12,000. "There," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "Enough for you to start over. You can find a place in Annapolis, maybe even Baltimore. The cabin is spoken for now, a $3 million cash offer. It was the smart thing to do." I kept my eyes on the check, my fingers resting lightly on the brass key I wore on a cord around my neck. The air between us carried the faint smell of his cologne, too sharp for the room. "You sold the cabin," I said, my voice steady. "You've been too busy to manage it," he replied quickly, his tone dressed up in reasonableness. "You're running jobs all over the coast, working yourself to the bone. I saved you from drowning in responsibility. This way, you can be free." I let him talk. He mistook my silence for resignation, a small smile curling his mouth. He spoke of investments of a buyer eager to renovate, of how generous it was to hand me a check instead of leaving me with nothing. What he did not know was that I had sat in Ellen Harper's office in Easton only 3 days earlier, signing documents that transferred the cabin into an irrevocable trust. What he did not know was that a fraud alert already sat on file at the Talbot County Registry of Deeds, waiting like a tripwire. I lifted the check, turned it once in my hand, and set it back on the table. My father leaned back, certain he had won. I rose from my chair and walked to the window, the lake stretching out in silence, the pines unmoved by his schemes. I breathed slowly, gathering the composure that had carried me through harder storms. When I turned back, I smiled, and that was the moment he should have realized he had stepped into a story already written by someone else. The next chapter of that story began with a whisper carried from a St. Michael's bar. After my father left that afternoon, the cabin fell into the kind of silence that carries memory in its walls. I sat at the table, the check still lying where he had placed it, and thought of the winters that had passed since my mother's death. I was 24, then old enough to know what loss felt like, but too young to understand how permanent it would be. The probate judge in Easton signed the papers transferring the cabin to me, a formality that felt less like inheritance and more like a sentence. My father had already grown restless, his attention drifting toward quick ventures and whispered promises of easy money. I stayed. Someone had to. The cabin had been falling in on itself, roof shingles, curling windows swollen with rot, floors sagging where water crept in. I worked jobs in Oxford during the day and came back to strip wallpaper, replace joists, and sand floorboards at night. My hands toughened, my back learned the ache of labor, but I kept going. Each repaired beam was a line of dialogue between my mother and me, one I wasn't willing to forget. Through those years, my father's calls came steady. He needed bridge loans, cash for a truck repair help covering late mortgage payments on a house in Cambridge he swore he could flip. I said yes too often. I told myself it was family duty, that if I refused, he'd spiral into ruin. In truth, part of me believed control equaled safety. If I kept the purse strings, I could prevent disaster. But control has a cost. Every dollar I sent his way pulled me further into silence. A silence where I didn't ask why he needed so much, didn't press for promises I knew he'd never keep. I became the steady wall he leaned against, even as the weight of it bent me. The cabin, though, never betrayed me. Each winter, I stoked the wood stove, watched the snow gather against the stone steps, and reminded myself that this house was proof I could endure. Still, endurance is not the same as freedom. It was Lucas who reminded me of that with a whisper carried from a St. Michael's bar. It was Lucas who broke the silence. He called late in the evening, his voice carrying the unease of someone who wished he didn't have to speak. He told me he'd been at a marina bar in St. Michael's, half listening to the chatter over cheap whiskey, when my father's voice cut through. William had been bragging to anyone who'd listen that the lake place would be gone within the week, a deal already lined up, money as good as in his pocket. Lucas paused, as if unsure whether to go on, then added the part that made my chest tighten. My father told the table I was too naive to notice a signature slipped under my hand. He laughed when he said it. That laughter, even second-hand, felt like a blade. By morning, I was sitting in Ellen Harper's office in Easton. Ellen had been recommended to me years ago, but I'd never had cause to call. She greeted me with a measured calm that steadied my own pulse. I laid out the story, the debts, the check on my table, Lucas's warning. She listened without interruption, then leaned forward and told me plainly a forged power of attorney was already in motion. If we didn't act, the county could record a deed before I ever knew it existed. We moved quickly. Ellen prepared the documents transferring the cabin into an irrevocable trust, naming me lifetime beneficiary and trustee. I signed each page with deliberate strokes, aware of the weight in my hand. She also drafted a fraud alert affidavit for the Talbot County Registry of Deeds. That filing, she explained, would act as a tripwire. Any attempt to slip a forged document through would trigger review. As I walked out of her office, the cold Easton air hit my face with the force of certainty. I had finally drawn a line that no one, not even my father, could cross. That certainty carried me home, where preparation became my only language. The days after my meeting with Ellen moved with a strange rhythm, each hour split between waiting and working. I wanted proof, not just suspicion. So I filled the cabin with quiet witnesses, small cameras tucked above the doorway and the kitchen rafters in the office where my father liked to spread papers across the desk. Their red lights blinked only for me, tiny beacons of resolve. Ellen arranged for a handwriting expert in Baltimore to review samples I'd saved, old tax forms, my mother's will letters I'd signed for insurance claims. Side by side with the supposed power of attorney, the forgeries betrayed themselves. Loops too shallow, pressure uneven, a signature crafted by someone who thought practice could replace intimacy. Meanwhile, Ellen traced the bank activity linked to the buyer. The account led to a man I remembered from childhood cookouts, one of my father's poker companions from Trap. Money shuffled between them in restless movements, small deposits, sudden withdrawals, then silence. It was less a business transaction than a shell game, and the pieces were already falling out of his hands. Margaret Blair at the Registry of Deeds called Ellen late one evening. She had flagged a packet dropped after hours, documents that looked rushed, signatures that made her frown. She promised they would not slip through unnoticed. In her steady voice, I heard the kind of quiet allyship that cannot be bought. Lucas offered to come by to help with the cameras or simply to sit with me through the waiting. I told him no. Control felt safer than company, and I convinced myself I needed to steer every detail alone. His disappointment was soft but audible before he hung up. I hated myself a little for it, but I could not let anyone touch the edges of my plan. By the time my father called to invite me to dinner, I was ready to let the stage set itself. The Bayview Grill sat on the Annapolis waterfront glass windows framing the harbor light against a pale horizon. My father had chosen it with the flourish of a man celebrating victory. When I arrived, he was already at the table, a bottle of wine chilling in its bucket menus, spread out like props in a play. "Sit down, Faith," he said, his voice full of cheer. "This is a night for goodbyes, but also for beginnings. You'll see." I took my seat, folding the napkin across my lap as if nothing in me trembled. He poured 2 glasses of wine, raising his in a toast. "To your freedom," he said. "No more carrying that place alone. I've relieved you of the burden." I let my glass touch his, though I didn't drink. He leaned back, satisfaction lighting his face. "You should be thanking me. $3 million isn't a bad price. I've secured our future, and the $12,000, that's my way of making sure you land on your feet." The words slid over me like ice. He wanted me grateful for being cut out of my own life. Instead, I smiled faintly, the expression he mistook for surrender. Halfway through the meal, Ellen walked in. She pretended surprise when she spotted me, asked if she might join us. My father's brows rose, but he gestured politely to the empty chair. He still believed he held every card. As the waiter cleared our plates, he began to talk more freely, perhaps emboldened by the wine. His voice grew softer edged with something raw. "You know, Faith, your mother always favored you, even in her will. That house should have been mine by rights. I built the dock, repaired the roof, paid the taxes when she couldn't. And what did the judge do? Handed it all to you like I was some afterthought." I watched him carefully. Beneath the swagger lay the wound that drove every scheme. He hadn't just sold the cabin, he had been trying to erase the slight he believed my mother carved into stone the day probate ended. Ellen caught my eye and gave the smallest nod. The mask was slipping. The stage was nearly set for the truth that would break him open. The moment arrived sooner than I expected when the dinner shifted from performance to trial. The waiter set down fresh glasses of wine, and Ellen leaned forward, her tone almost conversational. "William, I happened to stop by the registry this week. Interesting timing on some documents filed under your name." His fork paused mid-air. "What documents?" She reached into her bag and slid a folder across the table. Inside lay copies of the trust filings stamped and dated 3 days before. "This cabin is no longer vulnerable to your signatures. It belongs to an irrevocable trust with Faith as lifetime beneficiary. Any deed attempted afterward is void." My father's face darkened. He rifled through the pages as though disbelief might undo the ink. "You can't do this to me. I already had a buyer." Ellen's voice was calm, clinical. "The so-called buyer is linked to a shell account in Trap tied directly to one of your poker acquaintances. Funds never cleared escrow. If you represented otherwise, that qualifies as fraud." He slammed the folder shut. "You think you're clever, but I poured years into that property. Paid bills when your mother couldn't. Faith owes me." I felt the words burn, but I kept my composure. "I don't owe you theft." He leaned closer, lowering his voice as if secrets could save him. "You don't understand. I'm drowning. Thomas and lenders are breathing down my neck. I can't walk the harbor without someone reminding me of my debts. Selling that place was my chance to stay afloat." Ellen's expression hardened. "And forging a signature exploiting your own daughter under Maryland law that's document fraud, attempted theft by deception and financial exploitation of a family member. The district attorney could press charges tomorrow." For a moment, the swagger drained out of him. His eyes darted toward the window where the lighthouse blinked against the darkening sky. Then he straightened, summoning a last defense. "So what now? You going to drag me off in handcuffs?" "Not yet," Ellen said. "Prosecutors often weigh restitution. If you begin repayment, if you cooperate, it may affect how charges are pursued. But make no mistake, your exposure is real, and the clock has already started." Silence settled between us, thick as the tide outside. He shifted in his chair, suddenly smaller, and I realized this dinner was no farewell. It was the first hearing of his reckoning. The real terms would be set in the days that followed when boundaries had to be written in ink. The morning after the dinner, I drove back to Ellen's office with the tide still low along the Annapolis shore. The file from the night before lay open on her desk, its pages marked with yellow tabs. She asked what outcome I wanted, her tone steady, her eyes searching for the line I was willing to draw. "I don't want this swept under the rug," I said. "But I also don't want to see him in an orange jumpsuit if there's another way." Ellen nodded, already drafting. "We would initiate civil action not to punish, but to preserve leverage." At the same time, she outlined a restitution framework. William would begin repayments from whatever assets he could liquidate, attend mandatory financial counseling, and sign a covenant forbidding him from contacting me about the property or attempting to interfere with the trust. Any breach would trigger both the civil case and the criminal referral waiting in the wings. When I explained this to Lucas over coffee in Oxford, he frowned into his mug. "Do you realize what this will do to him? He'll say we're destroying him, not saving him." I looked at my cousin, weary of the balance I had to hold. Maybe both can be true. I can't ignore what he tried to take from me, but I'm not blind to what it means to prosecute your own father. The admission left a taste of ash in my mouth. I feared the weight of public disgrace, feared that even justified steps might sever something beyond repair. But I also knew silence would only invite another attempt. Lucas pressed his lips together, then finally nodded. "If this is what keeps you safe, I'll stand with you." It was a fragile kind of peace, one that steadied me as I prepared to reset every lock on my life. Back at the cabin, I began with the locks. New hardware gleamed against the old pine doors. Each turn of the wrench was a reminder that control could be practical, not just symbolic. I walked the shoreline afterward, marking the places where erosion had crept closer. Under Maryland Department of the Environment rules, I installed low stone buffers and native plantings, building a quiet defense against forces older and more patient than any family quarrel. Inside, I hung 2 frames above the mantel. One held my mother's original deed, the paper yellowed but still legible in her careful script. The other displayed the new trust certificate, crisp and formal proof that the cabin's story had not ended with betrayal. Together, they told a lineage of survival. William tried to slip through anyway. He called Lucas, spinning the same tired lines about family loyalty, about how I had been poisoned against him. Lucas told me later he listened, but this time he didn't bend. "If you want to talk about money or the house," he said to William, "do it through Ellen." Hearing that gave me a relief so sharp it nearly felt like grief. At my next meeting with Ellen, I found myself confessing what I hadn't dared name. "The more I tighten things, the more alone I feel," I admitted. "I keep thinking if I control every hinge and every dollar, nothing can touch me. But it leaves no room for anyone else to stand beside me." Ellen closed the file gently. "Safety matters," she said. "But walls can turn into cages if you never open the gate." Her words lingered with me long after I left, carrying into the last weeks of summer, when Oxford's streets grew crowded with visitors and the air hinted at change. By late August, Oxford's streets pulsed with tourists, the farmers' market filled with crates of peaches and jars of honey. Harbor Park overflowed with families listening to music by the bay, the rhythm of a town that looked untouched by private wars like mine. William had begun restitution under Ellen's supervision. The payments were small-clipped from the wages he earned repairing boats in Tilghman Island, but they came on time. I kept each receipt in a folder not for revenge, but because the record mattered more than his promises ever had. I needed my own act of repair, one that stretched beyond bloodlines. So I set up a small grant through a local land trust designed to help homeowners fight deed fraud. A few applications arrived within weeks. People with stories too familiar, signatures questioned, neighbors coerced. For the first time in months, I felt my vigilance building something rather than only guarding against loss. Then a letter came in William's hand, unadorned and plain. No apologies, no excuses, just a single request to stand at the road and look at the cabin once more. I carried the letter to the lake, read it on the granite steps where my mother used to sit. The request was modest compared to the damage done, and yet it stirred something complicated. After days of weighing, I allowed it one visit supervised from the gravel shoulder beyond the gate. When he came, he kept his distance. He looked at the roof lines, the stone chimney, the maples shifting in the late summer breeze. His face was unreadable, but his silence was the closest thing to respect I had ever received from him. By September, I understood the future would be written in boundaries, not bargains. A year passed in measured increments marked not by drama but by steady, deliberate steps. Each month, Ellen sent me updates, William's partial compliance, small payments logged, counseling sessions attended. None of it erased what he had done, but it carved a rhythm of accountability I could live with. When I met Ellen in her Easton office, she spread the file across the desk. "He's meeting the terms," she said. "Not perfectly, but consistently enough to keep the civil action in abeyance." I nodded. It was not forgiveness I felt, nor the hollow ache of unresolved anger. It was something quieter, the recognition that I could not fix him, only fix the lines he once crossed. Back at the cabin, the air carried the first bite of autumn. I had prepared a shadow box for the mantel. Inside, I placed 3 things: the brass key I had worn around my neck, the trust certificate with Ellen's crisp filing stamp, and the photograph of the cabin my mother had taken the summer before she died. Together, they told a story of survival, of what was nearly taken and what had been reclaimed. I stood back and studied the display. The key no longer needed to rest against my skin. It belonged there behind glass as both artifact and promise. The cabin breathed with its own quiet life around me, its walls no longer trembling under threat. Outside, the maples swayed, and the lake caught the light like polished glass. My father's shadow lingered somewhere beyond the gate, but he no longer stood inside. That boundary was mine to keep, and I intended to hold it. The story of the cabin was not over. Sitting by the lake, the cabin's quiet strength around me, I traced the lessons carved into this ordeal. Control, I learned, is a double-edged sword, vital for protection, yet isolating when wielded too tightly. I had built walls to shield the cabin, but they risked caging me, leaving no room for trust or connection. My father's betrayal taught me that love cannot excuse deceit. Boundaries, not blind loyalty, preserve what matters. Yet his unraveling showed me that accountability, not vengeance, offers a path forward. Setting up the grant revealed that my pain could build something larger than myself, turning vigilance into purpose. Ellen's words lingered safety matters, but walls must have gates. I understood now that holding the line doesn't mean standing alone. Lucas's quiet support proved that. The cabin, like me, endured because I chose to act, not just endure. Its deed the key, the trust they're more than objects. They're proof that survival demands both resolve and openness. I won't loosen my grip on what I've reclaimed, but I'll leave space for others to stand beside me, sharing the weight of a story still being written.
My brother's voice carried across the restaurant with the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences for anything in his life. So I accessed Riley's brokerage account. She gave me her password years ago, remember? And liquidated those weird tech stocks she'd been hoarding. Cleared my credit card debt completely. $43,000 worth of garbage shares turned into something useful for once. He said it like he'd done me a favor. I set down my fork very carefully and reached for my water glass. Across the table at Maroni's, an upscale Italian place where my family gathered monthly, Dad was nodding approvingly. Smart thinking, Kyle, Dad said. Riley's been sitting on those shares for 8 years? Doing nothing with them. At least you put them to practical use. Mom looked vaguely uncomfortable but said nothing. She never did when Kyle was involved. Golden child syndrome, my therapist had called it. Kyle could burn down the house and Mom would praise his initiative in testing the smoke detectors. You gave him your password? My sister Jessica asked, looking at me with confusion. Why would you do that? I hadn't. But explaining that to my family required energy I didn't have right now. It was years ago, I said quietly. I don't even remember. That was a lie. I'd never given Kyle access to anything. But 8 years ago, when I'd been 24 and living at home briefly between apartments, Kyle had watched me log into my accounts. He'd always been good with computers, good at watching over shoulders, good at remembering passwords he had no business knowing. Well, crisis averted, Kyle continued, refilling his wine glass. I was looking at 22% interest on that debt. Would have been brutal. Riley's stocks were just sitting there gaining maybe 2% annually? Better to use them for something real. 2% annually. If only he knew. My phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it. You should be thanking Kyle, Dad said, looking at me with that expression, disappointment mixed with resigned acceptance of my inadequacy. He saved you from your own indecision. You've been sitting on those shares since you were 24, doing nothing with them. No investment strategy, no growth plan. Just stubbornness. Stubbornness, I repeated. Holding on to something worthless out of principle, Dad clarified. You've always been like that. Sentimental about the wrong things. My phone buzzed again. And again. Excuse me, I said, standing. I need to take this. I walked toward the restaurant's entrance, away from my family's table, and checked my phone. 7 missed calls from Marcus Webb, my attorney. 12 texts from Marcus. 3 texts from Jennifer Chin, my financial advisor. 1 text from David Park, my business partner. I called Marcus first. Riley, thank God, he answered immediately. Where are you? Family dinner at Maroni's. What's wrong? Your brother. Falcon. Did he access your brokerage account? My stomach dropped. How did you know? Because Fidelity's fraud department called me 20 minutes ago. Someone liquidated 150,000 shares of Neuralink Technologies from your account this morning. The transaction was flagged because it's over $40,000 and the selling pattern doesn't match your historical behavior. I leaned against the restaurant's exterior wall. He just told me. At dinner. He said he sold my worthless tech stocks to pay his credit card debt. Marcus was silent for 3 seconds. Then, Riley. Did you authorize this sale? No. Did you give him access to your account? No. He must have used an old password he saw years ago. I never changed it because I never thought. I stopped. Marcus, why are you asking me this? Why does the amount matter? Another pause. Riley, Neuralink Technologies went public 6 months ago. You were a founding team member. Those 150,000 shares weren't worth $43,000. At today's closing price of $2,180 per share, they're worth $327 million. The street tilted slightly. I put my hand against the brick wall to steady myself. Say that again. $327 million. Your brother just sold $327 million worth of stock without authorization and kept $43,000 to pay his credit card debt. The remaining $326,957,000 is sitting in your brokerage account's money market fund right now. Minus taxes, you're looking at roughly $280 million in liquid assets. I couldn't breathe properly. Riley, are you still there? I'm here. This is securities fraud. Unauthorized access to financial accounts. Potentially wire fraud. Your brother is looking at federal charges. I need to know, do you want to press charges? Through the restaurant window I could see Kyle laughing, Dad patting him on the shoulder. Mom smiling weakly. Jessica looking at her phone. What are my options? I asked. Option 1. We report this to the FBI and SEC immediately. Kyle gets arrested probably within 48 hours. He's looking at 10 to 20 years in federal prison for the dollar amounts involved. And option 2? We freeze all your family's trading accounts pending investigation, file a civil suit for damages, and let Kyle's lawyer convince him to settle. Either way, his life as he knows it is over. But option 2 might keep him out of prison if he cooperates fully. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Chin. Riley, I just saw the Neuralink sale. Please call me immediately. The tax implications alone are going to require serious planning. Also, and I hate to ask this, was this sale authorized? I texted back, not authorized. My brother accessed my account. Her response was immediate. Oh my God. I'm calling my lawyer. Don't do anything until we talk. Another text, this time from David Park, my business partner at Neuralink. Riley, Fidelity called me as an emergency contact on your account. What the hell is happening? Are you okay? I replied, long story. Family situation. I'm handling it. Do you need me to fly out there? This isn't just money, Riley. This is your money. Your years of work. Your equity. He was right. 8 years ago, I'd been part of the founding team for Neuralink Technologies, a neural interface company developing breakthrough brain-computer interface technology. We'd been 5 people in a garage in Palo Alto, working 80-hour weeks, living on ramen and venture capital fumes. I'd been the lead biomedical engineer. My patents formed the basis of our core technology. When we divided equity, I'd received 150,000 shares, roughly 8% of the company. For 8 years we'd built something extraordinary. Last year we'd achieved breakthrough FDA approval for our first consumer product. 6 months ago we'd gone public at $1,200 per share. The stock had nearly doubled since then. My 150,000 shares had gone from a theoretical promise to $327 million in actual value. And Kyle had sold them for $43,000 because he'd looked at outdated paper statements from 2016 and assumed they were still worth nothing. Marcus, I said, can you come to Maroney's restaurant? Now. I'm 15 minutes away. Bring documentation. Everything. I want my brother to understand exactly what he did. Riley, if you're going to confront him publicly. I'm not confronting him. I'm educating him. There's a difference. I hung up and walked back into the restaurant. My family was still at the table, dessert menus open, laughing about something. Everything okay? Mom asked when I sat down. Fine, I said. Just some work stuff. Still doing that consulting thing? Dad asked dismissively. He'd never understood my career. I tried to explain Neuralink once years ago and he'd glazed over after neural interfaces. To him I was 32, unmarried, working some vague tech job that wasn't as prestigious as Kyle's position at a hedge fund. Something like that, I said. Kyle was showing Jessica something on his phone, probably his credit card balance, now blissfully at zero thanks to my worthless stocks. Kyle, I said calmly, can you walk me through exactly how you accessed my brokerage account? He looked up, surprised by the question. Oh, I just used your old login. From when you lived at home that one summer. You had it written down in your desk drawer, remember? I kept a photo of it on my phone just in case you ever needed help with something. You kept a photo of my financial passwords. For emergencies, he said as if this were completely reasonable. And it turned out to be lucky. You had all that dead money just sitting there. Now it's doing something useful. And you sold all 150,000 shares? Every single one. Fidelity made it really easy. Just clicked, sell all, and boom, $43,000 in the account. Minus some fees but still. More than enough to clear my debt. Jessica's eyes widened. Wait, 150,000 shares sold for $43,000? That's like 29 cents per share. Riley, what company was this? That's terrible. Neuralink Technologies, I said. Kyle nodded. Some neural interface startup you worked for like a decade ago. I remember you being excited about it, but obviously it never went anywhere. The original certificates you had said the shares were worth practically nothing. The original certificates, I said, were issued at 3 cents per share during our series of funding in 2016. That was the strike price for employee options. Right, Kyle agreed. Basically worthless. That's why The company went public in April, I continued. At $1,200 per share. The table went quiet. It's currently trading at $2,180 per share, I said, my voice perfectly level. 150,000 shares at $2,180 each is $327 million. You sold $327 million worth of stock to pay $43,000 in credit card debt. Kyle's face went from confident to confused to pale in about 3 seconds. That's not, no. The statement I looked at said. You looked at paperwork from 2016, I said. 8-year-old documentation showing the strike price, not the current market value. You didn't check the actual current trading price. You just assumed my stock was still worthless and sold it without permission. Dad's voice was sharp. Riley, that's not funny. If those shares were really worth that much. Marcus Webb is coming here right now, I said. He's my attorney. He'll have documentation showing the exact transaction, the current market prices, and the federal statutes Kyle violated by accessing my account without authorization. Mom's hand went to her mouth. Kyle, you said she gave you permission. I thought she wouldn't mind. Kyle said, his voice rising. It was just sitting there. You don't understand, I was drowning in debt and Riley's always been weird about money anyway, hoarding these shares that never moved. They moved, I said quietly. They moved from 3 cents to $2,180. That's a 726,567% return over 8 years. I was holding them because I understood their value. You sold them because you didn't. Jessica was scrolling frantically on her phone. Oh my God. Neuralink Technologies. $2,180 per share. Riley, this says you're on the founding team. It says you hold patents on the core technology. 17 patents, I confirmed. I'm the lead biomedical engineer. I've been with the company for 8 years. But you told us you did consulting, Dad said weakly. I do consulting. For Neuralink. As an executive team member. I just never corrected your assumption that it was freelance work. It seemed easier than explaining biomedical engineering to people who weren't interested. Kyle stood abruptly, his chair scraping. This is insane. There's no way those shares are worth, they can't be. His phone buzzed. He looked at it and his face went completely white. What? Dad demanded. Fidelity just froze my trading account, Kyle whispered. They're saying, fraud investigation. They're saying I need to contact their security department immediately. That would be Marcus's preliminary action, I said. He's protecting the assets while we determine next steps. A man in a suit appeared at our table, Marcus Webb carrying a leather briefcase. He was early. Miss Chin, he said formally. I apologize for the interruption. I'm Marcus Webb, Ms. Chen's legal counsel. I need to speak with Kyle Chin regarding unauthorized access to financial accounts. The restaurant had gone quiet. Other diners were watching. This is a private family matter, Dad said, standing. You need to. This is a federal securities matter, Marcus interrupted. Kyle Chin accessed Riley Chen's brokerage account without authorization and executed a $327 million securities transaction. The SEC has been notified. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division has been notified. Fidelity's fraud department has frozen all related accounts pending investigation. He opened his briefcase and placed documents on the table. These are transaction records from this morning. 150,000 shares of Neuralink Technologies, sold at an average price of $2,176 per share. Total transaction value, $326,400,000. Kyle sank back into his chair. I didn't know they were worth that much. Ignorance isn't a defense for securities fraud, Marcus said. You accessed someone else's financial account, you executed an unauthorized trade, and you kept proceeds from that trade. Those are federal crimes. Mom was crying. Dad looked like he might have a heart attack. Jessica had her phone out, clearly Googling federal securities fraud penalties. What happens now? Dad asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus looked at me. That's up to Ms. Chin. She's the victim here. She decides whether to press criminal charges or pursue civil remedies. Every eye at the table turned to me. Riley, Mom said through tears, please. He didn't know. He made a mistake. Don't send your brother to prison. A mistake, I repeated. He stole my password, accessed my account without permission, sold my assets and kept the money. The only mistake was that he didn't check the current value before assuming I was too stupid to know what I owned. I never said you were stupid, Kyle protested weakly. You've been saying it for years, I corrected. Every time you've called my work, that consulting thing. Every time you've suggested I needed real financial advice. Every time you've treated my career like a cute hobby while bragging about your hedge fund job. You've been telling me I'm financially incompetent for so long you actually believed you had the right to take my assets. What do you want? Dad asked. Money? We'll figure out how to pay you back somehow. Pay me back. I laughed. Dad, Kyle would need to pay me $327 million. His entire net worth is what, maybe $400,000 in equity and retirement accounts? You and Mom have maybe $2 million? This isn't something you can fix with a payment plan. Marcus cleared his throat. Miss Chin, we should discuss this privately. The restaurant isn't. No, I said. They can hear this. Here are your options. Option 1. I file criminal charges. FBI arrests you probably tomorrow. You're looking at 10 to 20 years in federal prison for the dollar amounts involved. Your career is over. You'll be a convicted felon. His hands were shaking. Option 2, I continued. I don't file criminal charges. Instead, you sign over every asset you own, your apartment, your retirement accounts, your car, everything, to help offset the tax liability you created by forcing this sale. You also never access my accounts again, never give me financial advice again, and publicly acknowledge what you did. Publicly? Kyle whispered. I want a written apology, I said. Post it on your social media. Explaining that you stole from me, explaining that you thought my assets were worthless, explaining that you were wrong. I want everyone who's ever heard you condescend to me about money to know that you stole $327 million from your sister because you were too arrogant to check current market prices. That's humiliating, Dad said. It's proportional, I replied. He humiliated me for years by treating me like I was financially incompetent. Now he can experience humiliation while acknowledging the truth. Mom reached across the table. Riley, sweetheart, I know you're angry, but family is family. We can work through this privately. No one else needs to know. Everyone else already knows, I said. Fidelity knows. Marcus knows. The SEC knows. The FBI knows. My business partners know. The only people who didn't know are you, because you never bothered to ask what I actually do for a living. Jessica spoke up quietly. Riley, I'm so sorry. I never knew. When you talked about your work, I didn't pay attention. I assumed it was like Kyle said, some small consulting gig. I had no idea you were building something this big. No one did, I said. Because when I tried to explain it years ago, you all glazed over. Dad literally said, that sounds complicated, honey, maybe focus on something more practical. So I stopped explaining. I just kept working. Marcus's phone buzzed. He looked at it and frowned. Riley, I need to tell you something else. The Fidelity Fraud Department found additional unauthorized access attempts on your account. Kyle's been logging in every few months for the past 3 years, checking your portfolio. Kyle's face confirmed it before he spoke. I was just keeping an eye on things. Making sure you weren't making stupid investment decisions. You were monitoring my finances without my knowledge, I said. For 3 years. I was trying to help. You were waiting for an opportunity, I corrected. You've been watching my account, waiting for something you could rescue me from. Today you saw a chance to pay your debt and play the hero, so you took it. You didn't help me. You stole from me because you genuinely believed I wouldn't notice or care. The table was completely silent now except for Mom's quiet crying. I need your decision, Marcus said gently. Criminal charges or civil settlement? I looked at Kyle. My older brother who'd spent 34 years being the golden child, the success story, the one who understood money. The brother who'd just stolen $327 million from me because he couldn't imagine I might be more successful than him. Civil settlement, I said. With conditions. Kyle's shoulders sagged with relief. You sign over all your assets, I continued. Full financial disclosure, full cooperation with my attorneys. You post the public apology I mentioned. You attend a press conference with me and Neuralink's legal team, explaining what you did and taking full responsibility. And you never ever give me advice about money again. A press conference? Dad said. That will destroy his career. His career was stolen money from his sister, I said flatly. His career should be destroyed. Marcus was typing notes on his tablet. I'll draw up the settlement agreement tonight. Kyle, you'll need your own attorney. I'd recommend getting one immediately. How much time does he have to decide? Mom asked. 24 hours, Marcus said. After that, Ms. Chin files criminal charges and the FBI takes over. I stood picking up my purse. I'm leaving now. Kyle, you have until tomorrow at 5 p.m. to sign the settlement agreement. If you don't, Marcus files charges and you're on your own. Where are you going? Mom asked. Home, I said. My actual home. The condo I bought 3 years ago in Pacific Heights. The one I never mentioned because you all assumed I was renting some cheap apartment. I'm going to open a bottle of wine that costs more than Kyle's credit card debt and think about how I want to deploy $280 million in post-tax assets. I started walking toward the exit, then turned back. Oh, and Kyle, that $43,000 you kept? That's theft. Marcus will be filing a separate police report for that. You might want to return it. Jessica caught up with me in the parking lot. Riley, wait. I stopped, hand on my car door. A Tesla Model S that I'd also never mentioned because my family assumed I took public transit. I'm so sorry, Jessica said. Not just for today. For years of not paying attention. Not taking you seriously. I want to understand what you do. Really understand. Can we have coffee? Can you explain Neuralink to me? I want to know. I looked at my younger sister. The middle child who'd always stayed neutral, never defending me but never attacking either. The one who just stayed quiet while Kyle stole from me. Jessica, I appreciate the offer. But I don't owe anyone explanations anymore. I spent 8 years building something extraordinary while my family dismissed me. I'm not going to spend the next 8 years teaching you to take me seriously. Either you do or you don't. I do, she said. I promise I do. Then prove it, I said. Show up at the press conference. Sit in the front row. When reporters ask about our family's reaction, tell them the truth, that you didn't know what I'd built because you never asked. That's how you can support me now. Honesty. I got in my car and drove away, leaving my family in the parking lot of Maroney's, probably still trying to process what had just happened. My phone rang. David Park. I heard, he said. Marcus looped me in. Riley, I'm so sorry. Do you need anything? I need to know something, I said. 8 years ago when we were starting Neuralink, did you ever think we'd get here? That we'd build something worth this much? Honestly, I hoped. But I didn't know. You were the one who always believed. Even when VCs turned us down, even when the FDA process looked impossible, you kept saying we had something revolutionary. You were right. I was right, I repeated. I just wish my family had believed it too. Their loss, David said. You've got a whole company of people who believe in you. A whole industry that respects you. Your family will come around or they won't. But either way, you're still brilliant. After we hung up, I drove to my condo in Pacific Heights. The 3-bedroom place with bay views that I'd bought in cash 3 years ago when Neuralink Series C funding had paid out. The place my family had never seen because they'd never asked where I lived. I poured wine from a bottle I'd been saving, a 2009 Chateau Latour that cost $3,200. It tasted like victory and vindication, and 8 years of quiet success finally acknowledged. My phone buzzed with an email from Marcus. Kyle's attorney just called. He's willing to sign the settlement agreement. All terms accepted, including the public apology and press conference. He's terrified of federal charges. Documents will be ready tomorrow morning. Also, congratulations on your exit, even if it wasn't on your terms. $327 million is extraordinary. You've built something remarkable. I replied, thank you. And Marcus? Make sure the press conference is well attended. I want everyone to see this. The next week's press conference was covered by Bloomberg, TechCrunch, and the Wall Street Journal. Kyle stood next to me, pale and broken, reading his prepared statement. I accessed my sister Riley Chen's brokerage account without authorization and sold 150,000 shares of Neuralink Technologies stock. I believed these shares were worthless based on outdated information. In reality, I sold $327 million in assets. I did this because I didn't understand the value of what my sister had built. I didn't take her career seriously. I assumed I knew better about finance than she did. I was catastrophically wrong. Riley Chen is a founding member of one of the most innovative companies in the biomedical field. She's a brilliant engineer and businesswoman. I apologize to her, to Neuralink Technologies, and to everyone I've misled about my sister's accomplishments. The reporters had questions. Dozens of questions. About Neuralink's technology, about my role in the company, about what I plan to do with the liquidated assets. I'm reinvesting, I said. Neuralink is going places. I'm buying back shares on the open market. I believe in what we're building. I always have. That answer made the headlines. Neuralink engineer buys back $200 million in stock after brother's unauthorized sale. The stock price jumped 12% that day. My family didn't attend the press conference. But Jessica sent a text. I watched online. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry it took this long to say it. Mom called a week later. Riley, we need to talk about Thanksgiving. What about it? We're hosting like always. We want you to come. We want to start over. Understanding who you really are. Understanding who I've always been, I corrected. I didn't change. You just finally paid attention. Will you come? Please. I thought about it. About 8 years of dismissal and condescension. About Kyle's theft and Dad's approval of it. About a lifetime of being underestimated. I'll come, I said. On one condition. Anything. You introduce me correctly. Not as Riley the consultant. Not as Riley the tech person. As Riley Chen, founding engineer and major shareholder of Neuralink Technologies. I want my actual accomplishments acknowledged. I'm done being diminished. We can do that, Mom said quietly. We should have done that years ago. Thanksgiving came. I arrived at my parents' house in my Tesla, wearing a custom Armani suit that cost more than Kyle's monthly rent. Mom answered the door, and for the first time I could remember, she looked at me with something like awe. Riley, she said. You look successful. I am successful, I replied. I've been successful for 8 years. You're just seeing it now. The dinner was awkward. Kyle sat at the far end of the table, barely speaking, his settlement having cost him his apartment, his car, and most of his retirement savings. Dad tried to make conversation about my work but kept using wrong terminology, mixing up neural interfaces with artificial intelligence. But when Dad raised his glass for the traditional Thanksgiving toast, he said, to family. And to Riley, whose achievements we should have celebrated years ago. We're sorry it took a crisis to open our eyes. It wasn't enough. Not really. 8 years of dismissal couldn't be erased by one toast. But it was a start. After dinner, I drove back to Pacific Heights to my beautiful condo and opened my laptop. Neuralink had a new funding round coming up. New patents to file. New technology to develop. I had $280 million in liquid assets and a vision for what came next. My family finally saw me clearly. But the truth was, I didn't need them to anymore. I'd built something extraordinary while they weren't watching. And I was just getting started. The reservation was under my sister's name. Celestine, the 5-star French restaurant that had been featured in Michelin guides for the past 7 years. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, waiters in formal attire who moved like dancers between tables. My mother had chosen it for her birthday dinner. Somewhere elegant, she'd said. Somewhere that reflects our family's success. I arrived at 7 o'clock wearing a simple navy dress. Not designer, just well-made. Clean lines, good fabric. The kind of dress that would last 5 years instead of 1 season. Mom and my sister Vanessa were already seated, both dressed like they were attending the Met Gala. Mom wore a burgundy gown with statement jewelry. Vanessa had on something black and sparkly with a price tag I could probably guess within $100. "Claire," Mom said when she saw me. Not warmly. Just acknowledging my arrival. "Happy birthday, Mom." "Thank you." She looked me over and I saw the familiar disappointment flicker across her face. "Is that what you're wearing?" "Yes. It's very simple." Vanessa sipped her champagne. "Claire's aesthetic is minimalist. That's code for can't afford better." I sat down and placed my napkin in my lap. The waiter appeared immediately. "Can I offer you a drink, madam?" "Water is fine, thank you. We have several premium bottled waters." "Tap water is perfect." After he left, Vanessa laughed. "Tap water. At Celestine. That's very on brand for you. I'm not thirsty enough to spend $12 on water." "See, that's your problem," Mom said, opening her menu. "You think about money too much. Successful people don't worry about the cost of bottled water. Successful people probably became successful by not wasting money on overpriced water." Mom's lips tightened. "Your sister makes $180,000 a year as a pharmaceutical rep. She can afford to enjoy nice things without guilt." "I'm not feeling guilty. I'm feeling practical." "Practical," Vanessa repeated, making it sound like an insult. "That's Claire's whole personality. Practical clothes, practical apartment, practical life." The waiter returned with menus. "Tonight's specials include our Dover Sole Mooney Air, prepared tableside, and our Wagyu beef Wellington with black truffle demi-glace." Vanessa's eyes lit up. "What's the Dover Sole?" $140, madam." "Perfect. I'll have that." Mom ordered the beef Wellington at $165. Then they both looked at me. I scanned the menu. Everything was expensive, but that was expected at Celestine. The prices weren't the problem. I'd eaten here dozens of times. The problem was the show my family was about to put on. "The roasted chicken, please," I said. "That's $68, Vanessa said. "Claire, you don't have to order the cheapest thing on the menu." "I'm not. There's a pasta dish for $52. "Then why are you ordering chicken?" "At a 5-star French restaurant." "Because I like chicken." Mom set down her menu with more force than necessary. "Claire, this is embarrassing. Your sister and I are ordering appropriately for a restaurant of this caliber, and you're ordering like we're at a diner. It's a $68 chicken. It might as well be a $10 chicken given what else is available." The waiter stood there awkwardly. "Shall I put in the chicken order, madam?" "Yes, please," I said. After he left, Vanessa leaned forward. "You know what this is? It's you making a statement. Look at me, I'm so financially responsible I won't spend money on nice things. It's performative frugality. Or maybe I just wanted chicken. At Celestine, the restaurant people wait months to get reservations for. And you're ordering roasted chicken. Should I order something I don't want just to impress you? You should order something that shows you appreciate where you are." Mom held up her hand. "Girls, please. It's my birthday. Can we not fight?" "Sorry, Mom," Vanessa said. Then to me, "But seriously, Claire. Look around. Look at what people are wearing, what they're ordering. This restaurant is for successful people. People who've made something of themselves. And I haven't? Have you?" Vanessa's voice was genuinely curious, like she really wanted to know. "You work in restaurant consulting. You won't tell us how much you make. You live in a 1-bedroom apartment. You drive a 7-year-old Subaru. Nothing about your life says success. Maybe because success doesn't have to be loud. It does if you want people to know about it." Mom sighed. "Claire, honey, your sister isn't trying to be cruel. She's concerned. We both are. You're 33 years old. We just want to see you thriving." "I am thriving." "Are you?" Mom looked at me with genuine worry. "Because from where we sit it looks like you're barely getting by." I'm doing fine. Fine isn't thriving. Vanessa is thriving. She has a career, a beautiful home, a fiancé who adores her. She travels, she enjoys life. You just seem to be existing. The appetizers arrived. Escargot for Mom, foie gras for Vanessa, French onion soup for me. Even your appetizer is budget conscious, Vanessa muttered. It's $28. It's soup. Expensive soup. You don't belong in places like this, Mom said suddenly. Her voice wasn't cruel, just matter-of-fact. And I don't mean that harshly, sweetheart. I mean that you're not comfortable here. You're ordering soup and chicken and tap water because spending money makes you anxious. Places like this are for people who've achieved a certain level of success and you're just not there yet. Mom. The budget menu is more your style, Vanessa added. She was smiling like she was being helpful. There's no shame in it. Not everyone can afford fine dining. Maybe we should have gone somewhere more accessible. I stayed silent. I could have told them the truth. That I'd been restaurant consulting for the past 9 years, but not in the way they imagined. That I didn't advise restaurants, I acquired them. That my portfolio included 43 restaurants across 6 states, ranging from casual dining to Michelin-starred establishments. That I'd purchased Celestine 18 months ago for $14.2 million. That the one-bedroom apartment was a paid-off penthouse in a building where the monthly HOA fees were more than most people's rent. That my 7-year-old Subaru was paid for in cash and ran perfectly, so I saw no reason to replace it. That my net worth was approximately $67 million. But I'd learned years ago that telling my family these things didn't matter. They heard what they wanted to hear. Claire, the unsuccessful daughter. Claire who never quite launched. Claire who needed their concern and their advice. So I ate my soup in silence. Mom and Vanessa talked about Vanessa's upcoming wedding. The venue, the flowers, the designer dress. Mom was contributing $40,000 to the wedding budget. Because you deserve it, Mom said. You've worked hard. You deserve to celebrate. I wondered if Mom remembered my wedding 8 years ago. The small ceremony I'd paid for myself. The modest reception at a local restaurant. Mom had complained the entire time that it wasn't nice enough. That I should have asked for help. That she would have contributed if I'd just done things properly. I hadn't wanted her money. Even then I'd had enough of my own. The entrees arrived. Mom's beef Wellington looked like a work of art. Vanessa's Dover sole was prepared tableside with an elaborate show of flames and sauces. My roasted chicken was simple, elegant, perfectly cooked. How's your chicken? Vanessa asked with barely concealed sarcasm. Excellent. Worth the $68? Every penny. She shook her head. You're impossible to help. Halfway through the meal I noticed movement near the kitchen. Pierre Beaumont, the head chef, was emerging. He was looking around the dining room searching for someone. His eyes landed on our table. On me specifically. My stomach dropped. Pierre was brilliant. A 3 Michelin-star chef who'd agreed to stay on after my acquisition on the condition that he maintained complete creative control. We'd negotiated for 3 weeks before reaching an agreement. He reported directly to me and the restaurant board, which I chaired. We had a board meeting scheduled for next week. He knew not to approach me publicly. We'd discussed maintaining my anonymity. So why was he walking toward our table? Claire, he said when he reached us. His French accent was thick. Madam, I apologize for the interruption. But there is an urgent matter. The restaurant board needs your signature on the supplier contracts tonight. The deadlines. He stopped. He'd seen my face. The subtle shake of my head. Too late. Mom was staring at him. I'm sorry, what did you say? Pierre looked confused. I said the board needs Ms. Chen's signature. The board. Vanessa's voice was sharp. What board? Pierre looked at me. I could see him trying to understand what was happening. Why I hadn't told my family. What he should say now. The restaurant board, he said carefully. Why would Claire need to sign anything for Celestine's board? Mom asked. The answer was obvious, but Pierre clearly didn't want to be the one to say it. He looked at me again, silently pleading for guidance. I set down my fork. Because I chair the board. Silence. Then Vanessa laughed. What? Oh, that's ridiculous. I chair the restaurant board for Celestine. But you're a consultant, Mom said. I consult on restaurants I own. Then I serve on their boards. Pierre was backing away slowly. I will leave the documents at the host stand for you, madam. My apologies for the interruption. He disappeared back toward the kitchen before anyone could ask more questions. Mom's face had gone pale. Claire, what is he talking about? I own Celestine. You own this restaurant? Yes. This restaurant specifically? Celestine. Yes. Vanessa was shaking her head. That's impossible. Restaurants like this cost millions. You don't have millions. I have enough. How much is enough? I purchased Celestine for $14.2 million 18 months ago. The table next to us had gone quiet. They were trying not to stare but failing. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. $14 million. That's what the previous owners were asking. I negotiated down from $16 million. But where? How would you get $14 million? From the other restaurants. The portfolio generates about $9 million annually. I financed part of the Celestine purchase, but I had enough for a substantial down payment. Vanessa was scrolling frantically on her phone. There's nothing online about you owning Celestine. I keep a low profile. The ownership is through an LLC. But someone would know. The staff would. The staff does know. The board knows. The chef knows. They're just discreet. Mom was still processing. You own other restaurants? A portfolio. 43 restaurants across 6 states. This is the flagship, but I own everything from casual dining to fine dining establishments. 43 restaurants. Yes. And you said $9 million? Annually. Last year was $9.2 million. This year is tracking slightly higher. Vanessa had found something on her phone. Holy shit. There's an article here. Anonymous buyer acquires Celestine in $14 million deal. It says the buyer is a private investment group with extensive restaurant holdings. That's my LLC. You're a private investment group? I'm the private investment group. The waiter appeared looking nervous. Is everything satisfactory with your meals? Everything is perfect, thank you, I said. He nodded and retreated quickly. I had a feeling Pierre had briefed the entire staff about what had just happened. Mom set down her fork. She hadn't taken a bite in several minutes. I don't understand. How long have you been doing this? 9 years. I bought my first restaurant at 24. With what money? I'd been working as an actual consultant, helping struggling restaurants improve their operations. I saved everything. When a small Italian place I'd been advising went up for sale, I bought it for $300,000. Turned it around, sold it 2 years later for $850,000. Used that profit for the next acquisition. And you just kept going? I kept finding undervalued restaurants with good bones but poor management. I'd acquire them, improve operations, either keep them as income generators or sell them for profit. Vanessa was reading more on her phone. This article says the buyer has a reputation in the industry for transforming struggling establishments into profitable ventures. That's you. That's me. There are people in the comments speculating about who it is. Someone said they heard it was a European investment firm. Someone else thinks it's a celebrity investor. Neither. It's just me. Mom's hands were shaking. Claire, you let us think you were struggling. I never said I was struggling. You assumed it. Because you live in a tiny apartment and drive an old car and order the cheapest things on menus. I live in a paid-off penthouse, drive a reliable car I purchased with cash, and order what I want to eat regardless of price. You interpreted all of that as struggling because it didn't match your definition of success. You could have told us. Would you have believed me? Vanessa looked up from her phone. No. If you told us 3 years ago that you owned restaurants, we would have thought you were delusional. Exactly. So I stopped trying to explain. I built my business quietly. And at family dinners I just listened. While we bragged about our accomplishments, Vanessa said quietly. While I talked about my $180,000 salary to someone who makes $9 million a year. Your accomplishments are legitimate. You worked hard for that salary. But we were condescending about it. About your life, your choices, your success. You were working with incomplete information. Mom was crying now. Silent tears running down her face. I told you that you don't belong in places like this. I said this restaurant is for successful people. And you own it. Yes. Why didn't you say something? Right then? Why did you just sit there? Because I've learned that correcting people's assumptions just makes them defensive. It's easier to let them think what they want. Even when what we think is completely wrong. Especially then. Our waiter appeared again, this time with the restaurant manager, Laurent, who I'd hired 6 months ago. He approached carefully. Miss Chin, Laurent said quietly. Chef Beaumont apologizes profusely for the disruption. He was unaware that you were dining with family and had not disclosed your position. It's fine, Laurent. It was bound to come out eventually. Nevertheless, he wishes to offer his personal apologies. And the staff would like to know if you'd prefer to move to the private dining room for the remainder of your meal. That won't be necessary. Very well. Also, Chef has prepared a special dessert course for your party if you'll accept it. Of course. Thank you, Laurent. After he left, Vanessa put her phone down. They're treating you like royalty. They're treating me like their employer. Same thing in a restaurant context. Mom wiped her eyes. I need to understand something. You've been coming to family dinners for years. Listening to us talk about our jobs, our money, our lives. Never saying anything about this. Why? Because it didn't matter. You weren't interested in who I actually was. You were interested in who you thought I was. The unsuccessful daughter who needed guidance. That's not fair. Isn't it? Mom, do you remember when I bought my first restaurant? He thought about it. Vaguely. I was 24. I came to Sunday dinner so excited. I told everyone I'd just purchased an Italian restaurant. Do you remember what you said? She was quiet. You said, that's a terrible investment. Restaurants fail all the time. You're going to lose everything. Dad said I was being reckless. Vanessa said I was having a quarter-life crisis. We were concerned. You were dismissive. So I stopped sharing. I ran my business, made my acquisitions, built my portfolio. And at family dinners I just existed. Because it was easier than constantly defending myself. But we thought you needed help. We thought you were barely making it. I know. And I let you think that because the alternative, constantly arguing about my life choices, was exhausting. The dessert course arrived. Individual soufflés, crème brûlée, a chocolate tart. All prepared with exquisite care. We ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Vanessa spoke. I told you the budget menu was more your style. You did. I'm the worst person alive. You're not. You just didn't have all the information. I had enough information to not be a condescending asshole. She looked at me. I'm sorry, Claire. For all of it. For assuming. For judging. For treating you like you were less than. I forgive you. Just like that. Just like that. Why? Because holding grudges is exhausting. And because you're my sister. Mom was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, I contributed $40,000 to Vanessa's wedding. I know. I never offered to help with your wedding. You didn't. Because I didn't think you needed it. I thought you were being cheap on purpose. Being difficult. I know. I'm so sorry, Claire. I know that too. After dinner, Laurent appeared with a leather folder. Ms. Chin, Chef Beaumont left the supplier contracts for your review. And there's the matter of tonight's bill. Charge my personal account, I said. Same as always. He nodded and retreated. Vanessa stared. You have a personal account here? At your own restaurant. I eat here several times a month. It's easier to keep it separate from business expenses. Do you pay yourself? Yes. The same prices as any other customer. It's cleaner for accounting. You're paying for Mom's birthday dinner at your own restaurant. It's Mom's birthday. Of course I'm paying. Mom looked like she might cry again. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. We left around 10 o'clock. In the parking lot, Vanessa stopped beside her Mercedes. Your car, she said, pointing at my Subaru. That's really what you want to drive? It's reliable, fuel efficient, and paid off. Why would I replace it? Because you could afford a Ferrari. I could afford a dealership. But I'd still drive this. She laughed. You're the weirdest rich person I've ever met. I'm the only rich person you've met. Fair. Mom hugged me longer than usual before getting in her car. Can we talk this week? Really talk. Of course. I want to understand. How you did this. Why you did this. And why you never told us. Okay. Are you happy, Claire? Truly happy. I thought about my 43 restaurants. My carefully built portfolio. My quiet life that I'd designed exactly how I wanted it. Yeah, Mom. I'm really happy. Good. That's all I ever wanted for you. The next morning I woke up to 32 text messages. Not from Mom or Vanessa. From extended family members. Cousins, aunts, uncles, people I hadn't heard from in years. All suddenly very interested in my restaurant consulting business. All mentioning they had great restaurant ideas, if I was looking for investments. I responded to Mom's text and ignored the rest. 3 days later Mom invited me to lunch. Not at Celestine, at a small cafe near her house. I wanted somewhere neutral, she explained. Somewhere you don't own. I don't own this one. Good. We ordered coffee and sandwiches. Then Mom pulled out a notebook. I've been thinking, she said. About all the times I gave you unsolicited advice. About your career, your life, your finances. I made a list. Mom, you don't need to. I do. Because I need to apologize for each one. Starting with the time I suggested you get a real job with benefits when you were building your portfolio. That was 2019. You'd already owned 8 restaurants at that point. Mom. Let me do this. Please. So I let her. She went through her list. Every dismissive comment, every piece of unwanted advice, every time she treated me like I needed to be rescued from my own choices. When she finished, she closed the notebook. I'm not asking you to forget any of that. I just need you to know that I see it now. I see you now. Thank you. Can I ask you something? About the money? Of course. Do you ever feel guilty? Having so much when others have so little? Every day. That's why I focus on restaurants that employ people, serve communities, create opportunities. It's not charity, but it's not just profit either. She smiled. Your father would be proud. He always said you were the smart one. He said that. All the time. He just didn't know how to tell you. We talked for 2 hours. Really talked for the first time in years. About my business, my life, my future plans. Mom asked questions, real questions, not judgmental ones. She listened without offering advice. As we were leaving, she said, Vanessa wants to have dinner. Just the 3 of us. No husbands, no partners. Just the girls. I'd like that. She's embarrassed. About how she treated you. She doesn't need to be. She does though. That's part of learning. Being embarrassed by your past behavior. 2 weeks later, the 3 of us met at a small Italian restaurant. Not one I owned. I'd learned that lesson. Vanessa brought a gift. It's not much, she said, handing me a wrapped box. Inside was a book, The Silent Entrepreneurs, Building Empires Without Fanfare. I found it at a bookstore, Vanessa said. Made me think of you. Thank you. Also, I want to apologize. I know I already did, but I've been thinking about it more. About how many times I was cruel or dismissive. About how I made your success invisible by refusing to see it. Vanessa. I'm not done. I also want to say that I'm proud of you. Not just for what you built, but for how you built it. Quietly. Without needing recognition or applause. That takes a kind of strength I don't have. You have your own strengths. Maybe. But I'm learning from yours. We ordered dinner. No conversation about who was getting what or how much it cost. We talked about Vanessa's wedding, Mom's retirement plans, my newest acquisition. At one point, Vanessa asked, Do you ever want to go public? Let people know who you are. Not really. But you've built something incredible. Don't you want credit for it? I have credit where it matters. In my industry, among the people I work with. I don't need strangers to know. That's very zen. It's very practical. Mom laughed. Everything with you is practical. Is that bad? No, Mom said. It's perfect. It's exactly who you are. 6 months after the birthday dinner at Celestine, I received an invitation to speak at a restaurant industry conference. The organizers wanted to discuss anonymous acquisition strategies in fine dining. I declined. A week later they called back. We'll keep your identity confidential, they promised. We just want your insights. I agreed to a private roundtable with other restaurant owners. No cameras, no press, no public attribution. At the round table, I sat next to a woman who owned a small chain of breakfast restaurants. She was struggling with expansion financing. "The banks don't take me seriously," she said. "They look at me, a woman under 40, and they see risk. Never mind that my restaurants are profitable and growing." I gave her my card. "Call me next week. I might be able to help." 2 months later, I became a minority investor in her breakfast chain. Not because I needed another investment, but because I remembered being the woman no one took seriously. The chain now has 12 locations and is projected to hit $15 million in revenue this year. At a family barbecue last month, Vanessa asked if I was hiring. "For what?" I asked. "Anything. I'm thinking about career changes." "You make $180,000 in pharma. Why would you leave?" "Because I'm tired of sales. I want to build something. Create something. Like you did." "That's a big change." "I know. But watching you these past few months, I realized I've been chasing money instead of purpose." "You found both." I thought about it. "I don't have any open positions right now. But I know someone who might. Let me make some calls." 3 weeks later, Vanessa started as a restaurant operations consultant for a firm I'd partnered with on several acquisitions. She took a pay cut, down to $120,000. But she was excited in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Thank you," she said when she called after her first week. "Not just for the connection. For showing me that success doesn't have to look like I thought it did." "You're welcome. Also, I'm buying my own lunch now. Even at nice restaurants." "Good for you. Even if it's just chicken." I smiled. "Especially if it's just chicken. Last week I had dinner at Celestine with my family. Mom's birthday again. This time her 63rd. We sat at my usual table in the corner. The one with the best view of the dining room. The one I'd specified when I purchased the restaurant. Mom ordered the beef Wellington. Vanessa got the sea base. I ordered the roasted chicken. "You always get the chicken," Vanessa said. "Because it's perfect. Even though you could order anything?" "Especially because I could order anything. I order what I actually want." Mom raised her glass. "To Claire, who taught us that success doesn't have to be loud to be real." We toasted. We ate. We talked about our lives, honestly, without posturing or pretense. And when Pierre came out from the kitchen to greet us, he smiled at me and said, "The chicken is prepared exactly as you like it, madam." "Perfect," I said. "Thank you, Pierre." After he left, Vanessa shook her head. "You have the head chef of a Michelin-starred restaurant remembering how you like your chicken." "I eat here a lot." "You own here a lot." "That too." Mom was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know what I regret most?" "What?" "All those years I spent worrying about you. Thinking you needed help. Giving you advice you didn't need. I wasted so much energy trying to fix something that wasn't broken." "You were being a mom." "I was being a mom who didn't see her daughter clearly." "That's different." "You see me now." "I do. And I'm still learning things. Like how the quietest person at the table is often the most successful. How simplicity is a choice, not a limitation. How strength doesn't always look like what we expect it to look like." Vanessa added, "And how owning a 7-year-old Subaru is a perfectly valid choice even when you're worth tens of millions." "Especially then," I said. We finished dinner. Pierre sent out a special dessert course. Not because I owned the restaurant, but because he took pride in his work and wanted us to experience his latest creation. We ate it slowly, savoring every bite. And in that moment, sitting with my family in my restaurant, I realized something. The best revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's living so authentically that their wrong assumptions simply become irrelevant. I didn't need my family to know I was successful. I needed to be successful on my own terms. And I'd been doing that all along. Quietly. Consistently. Without fanfare. Just like my roasted chicken. Simple, perfect, and exactly what I wanted. Nothing more. Nothing less. Exactly enough.